Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. Okay guys, today we're going to be talking about how to maximize your damage. Yeah, you see my max damage videos now and then. How do I get the secret sauce into absolutely getting the biggest hits out of my champs? We're going to go through almost like the base layer today, and then we're also going to go into the more detailed ways to push damage on your champs. Now, let's get the meme out there first. I'm sure there'll be comments down below already. Yeah, you just need a credit card. Like, I mean, you do, but you need a freaking big one if that's going to be the way you go about doing it. Because there is a lot more detail in terms of maximizing damage than you might even believe. So we're going to start pretty simple, okay? Every champ has got multipliers against their abilities. It will always be in their skills, and this will be the multiplier in terms of what you need to build out. So for Fushan here, his damage is based off his attack, okay? You'll have some champions where they have damage based off of their HP, and then you have some other champions where they're based off of defense, okay? So that's the kind of like the base level. If you don't know what your champion scales from, you could be building completely the wrong stat. If I built attack on Whirling Frostspring, for example, he would gain no extra damage. Attack is the most irrelevant stat to this guy that exists in the game. Okay, so that's just the absolute base. There are some champions like a Rotus here who actually scales off of more than one stat. And this is quite unusual in Raid, but it's there. So Rotus scales from attack and HP. Generally, the first stat we see here is the one that scales faster. So in terms of doing some damage, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we get ourselves crit capped, or as close to it as we can, which means we want 100% crit rate. We would then build out the main stat that we build damage from, and we would build out crit damage. Those two things combined, there's actually a really fancy equation that you try and basically maximize two of these stats together. You don't just want like loads of attack and a small amount of crit damage. You want actually quite a nice balance of the two stats. The optimizer, the Hell Hades optimizer, actually calculates all of that for you. It calculates the best combination of attack and crit damage, or the attacking stat and crit damage, so that you would get the best bang for your buck on a build. So that's the basics, right? Now we have loads more stuff going on. Let's first talk about, let's talk about enemy max HP champions. They're basically the secret sauce of the game because their damage scales from the enemy's health. Pretty much any late game content you fight or any boss you fight, the enemy's health is gigantic, okay? So actually what you do is you cap your damage, because basically they'll have a cap in terms of how much damage you can even do, because Raid have appreciated that this is a crazy, crazy ability. But it still turns out in late game content, it's one of the most effective ways to kill something. And how do you cap this out? Well, basically you want to be pushing the same stats. Yeah, so for someone like a Newt, well, actually, it's slightly different. So if we're just talking about enemy max HP, all we need to do is cap crit and then get as much crit damage as we can. Right? So that will give us our enemy max HP stat. But for someone like Newt here, I actually build a lot of defense as well. So enemy max HP is like a Seer, for example. It's probably the most common one that people use, or a Cold Heart. In a lot of situations, I don't need a big attack stat. Look at this. I've just gone full crit damage for this build. And for her, literally as much crit damage as you can. Attack will only boost the hits of her A1. It will not boost the hit of her A3. If it just says enemy max HP like this, literally crit damage on a crit capped champion is all you need to do. But there are some more complexities that come in, right? So this amount of damage is also mitigated by the enemy's defense, which means that in harder content, you really need someone to put decreased defense on the enemy to be able to maximize this hit. So the enemy's defense mitigates the amount of damage you're going to do. Exactly the same, actually, with any damage. Okay, the enemy's defense will mitigate some of that damage, which is why decreased defense is a really strong ability in this game. You also get abilities like Weaken. So Weaken will allow you to just straight up do more damage. In fact, 25% more damage against champions with, or all bosses with this bigger Weaken. So suddenly you've then got drop defense and weaken together. Drop defense lowers the amount of mitigation that's going to happen, and then weaken just straight up gives you a damage boost to anything you're going to do in terms of a hit. Okay, so we're starting to build those layers up. Now, I've talked about defense being a big mitigator of damage, and it is. And therefore, what we try and do is we try and cut through as much defense as we can. So if we talk about someone like a Rotus here, Rotus has actually got the ability to ignore defense. Okay, he ignores 60% target defense with this A3 ability. So what you can do, and this ability here is additive. Okay, so if he's ignoring 60% defense and he is wearing a set of lethal gear, suddenly he's actually ignoring 85% of the enemy's defense. If I put cruel gear on as well, 90% of the enemy's defense. If we went crazy and we had a relic which ignores defense as well, I've only got one, annoyingly, but if we had the Cat's Gaze on, where it ignores 10% of the target's defense when attacking enemies with a higher max HP, suddenly I could ignore all of the enemy's defense without even using a decreased defense debuff. And that's where we get the crazy damage hits. Okay, and that is why you might see videos of certain champions, epics like Whisper, that have got inbuilt ignore defense mechanics. Where is it? Here we go. Will ignore defense if this target is under weaken. That's why these champions can do so much damage, because they completely ignore the enemy's defense in certain situations. So you're trying to tailor your teams to set up those situations. So some of the strongest champions in Arena for straight damage will be champions that you can get to, or as close as possible to, a full ignore defense. Now, there's other ways of getting yourself there as well if you've got high level blessings. So blessings now come in, right? And you know, a good example here again on Seer is Crushing Rend. Crushing Rend has the ability to ignore defense. In fact, at stage 6, level 6 specifically, each hit will ignore a percentage of the target's defense, and they will ignore 1% of the defense for every 10 levels the enemy have got. If you're talking about high-end content like hard faction wars, I think they're level like 350 or something like that. So you're actually ignoring 35% defense against really, really strong enemies, which means that a 6-star Crushing Rend is one of the cracked skills in the game because it really mitigates so much of the enemy's defense. Therefore, it boosts your damage. Look at the difference here. 5-star, the first 2 hits each round will ignore defense. Okay, so just think about that for a second. And it's 1% defense for every 25 levels. This is like 2.5 times better going from 5 to 6. And it's every hit. Like the step up is insane. And even if you think about 4-star, at that point, it's the first hit each round, and it's ignoring 1% for every 40 levels. So Crushing Rend is extremely strong at 5-star and 6-star, and it's way weaker at 4-star. In fact, you probably wouldn't choose it at 4-star for a lot of champs. So that's this, but this is one of the best ways in the game to mitigate the enemy's defense and therefore do more damage. Now, there are a lot of different blessings that actually do damage. So some are indirect, some are direct. Like Brimstone does damage because it puts a debuff on the enemy, which just ticks for a high amount of enemy max HP. If your champion does a lot of debuffs, Nature's Wrath does a lot of damage because you get more damage ramp up by the amount of debuffs you've placed. What else have we got here? Things like Soul Reap does damage in a different way. You get a tick of damage when the enemy is at low health. When it first came out, this was like what everyone thought would be the best blessing in the game, but turns out some of those other ones I've already spoken about are stronger. You've got Phantom's Touch is kind of like War Master. It does a little tick of damage against the enemy based on the amount of attack that you've got, and this is definitely a good damage blessing for any rare that's attack based, and honestly quite a lot of epics as well. This tends to be quite strong. So if you get 6-star, you actually get 2 ticks of damage. The other thing that's good about this blessing in particular is it does a tick of damage against the Fire Knight shield. So it can actually give you more hits to break the shield, just as a little sideline there. We've got things like Cruelty. This doesn't directly do damage for you, but other people hitting the boss reduce the enemy's defense. Again, reducing that defense mitigation, which means that you will end up doing more damage. This is particularly good in longer fights where you can have a support who hits a decent amount, reduces the defense so that your damage dealer is able to hit for more damage. Good in places like Clan Boss, honestly. That's probably its best place. That's the kind of like main ones that I would call out there. So we've got a number of layers, right? We've got layers of how you actually do damage, how you mitigate the enemy's defense to do more damage. Masteries comes in as another layer. So Masteries here, a lot of builds for a damage dealer will end in Helm Smasher. And the reason for that is because of what I've already spoken about. It's the way to ignore enemy defense. If you've already got ignore defense cap because of the rest of the stuff going on in your build, like my Rotus would have, then this skill becomes irrelevant. And you might be better off just taking a straight extra 20% crit damage from Flawless Execution. Or if you're fighting long boss fights and you want guaranteed damage, War Master is it particularly good against Clan Boss and some of the other bosses because it does a tick of damage based on the enemy's max HP. Okay, so you'll see a lot of builds end in War Master if someone does 1 or 2 hits with their A1, or if someone's a triple hit or a quad hit, then they might take Giant Slayer because you've got more chances of getting ticks, but the ticks is a lower overall chance. So you can get multiple, but it's a lower chance for them to actually happen. In terms of the offense tree, this is where you find most of your damage in stats or tricks, I guess. So things like increases damage when you're attacking with full health. So generally, you know, if you're setting yourself up to be able to go before the enemy and go into the enemy, then you're always going to be full health when you get started. You've got masteries like Ruthless Ambush, which for the first hit against each enemy, you get a big damage boost, 8%. We've got things like Single Out, increases damage when the target is lower health. We've got things like Bring It Down, increases damage against targets with higher max HP, which will be most enemy mobs in PvE. We've also got some nuanced ones. So increase your damage if you put crowd control on them. This is probably more relevant than it's ever been if you're doing late game content, because you have to crowd control, you know, enemies in stuff like hard faction wars, in Sintranos. You just have to crowd control them. So getting an extra 12% damage here is interesting. And then you've got stuff like Stoke to Fury, where you get more damage for debuffs on you. If you can force debuffs on you, like with a Gerp Tuck, then this is guaranteed damage, 12% more. So these are little tricks to be able to boost damage depending on how you're setting up your teams. In terms of other trees, they're not really there to boost your damage. You could say, you know, if you've got a defense-based guy and you open up with extra defense, yeah, you get a tiny amount of damage boost, but that's not really what it's about. So most of these other trees are just there to either keep you moving or keep you alive or allow you to play your abilities. I guess there are a couple of things which don't boost your damage directly, but indirectly. So Whirlwind of Death gives you more speed, and Spirit Haste gives you more speed when your team die. So sometimes, you know, these masteries that you can set up to deliberately be beneficial to you, do more damage by taking more turns. That's pretty much like the first 2 or 3 years of Raid Shadow Legends carved out. Now things start to get a bit more interesting. So there's a number of champions. In fact, this is someone who was around right from the start. But there's a number of champions that have got passives that straight boost your damage. Bad L. Allies inflict 20% more damage when you put the enemy under a poison. 20% straight damage multiplier. Imagine you were going to hit for 10k. You now hit for 12k. Straight damage boost. Okay. You've got champions like Gerp Tuck basically doing the same. His is slightly higher. He can go 3, and this is by poisoning you. He poisons you with 3 poisons, which means that you're basically going to get a, what's that, like 22.5% damage boost. I've got some champions that I don't have as well. So one of the favorites at the moment for doing this is Feral. So if an ally is under 4 or more buffs, increases their damage. Reason why this guy's so good is because he's also like a crazy good support for areas like Hydra and Chimera. So he's really interesting. But yeah, looking out for those ways to boost your damage through passives and abilities like that is super interesting. Now, the other thing which really has started to change the game is layering a lot of different components on top of each other. So we have got things like Faction Guardians. Just gives us like straight extra stats, okay? More stats which boost your damage and more speed, that type of thing. So Faction Guardians stats equals more damage. You've got Champion Empowerment. So if we look at someone on my squad who's actually had like the +4 treatment, don't have that many in fairness, but I've got a couple. So we've got the +4 treatment. Let's look at the stacking damage here. Let me grab an area bonus as well. Just grab Hydra. So stacking damage. We've got base stats. We then put gear on top of those base stats. We then have affinity bonuses. So yeah, affinity bonuses. I think this is actually Great Hall. So Great Hall gives us more stats, crit damage, more attack. Classic Arena is based on the rank of arena you're in. You get more stats for that. I've spoken about Masteries already. Faction Guardians I just spoke about. Empowerment. So this is me getting to +4. Getting to +4, I got an extra 30% crit damage and 600 attack. Okay, massive damage boost. We then get our blessing. So this guy's a 4-star blessing. More stats means more damage. If he was wearing a relic as well, more stats, more damage, plus some interesting bonuses. And then area bonuses is like the new live arena bonuses. So suddenly, you know, we've gone from old school being able to get like, what's this, like 5.5, call it 6k attack with 270-ish% crit damage. I've basically gained 1800 attack and like 80% crit damage through the new ways to boost damage, right? So it's just a load of different layers that you can put on top of like basic damage. And you can see how effective that is. The new kind of like stuff to add to that then are sets now. So some sets really are damage buffs. Feral set's a good example. So allies deal 5% more damage per each debuff placed by the wearer. So if you've got someone who places a ton of debuffs and you can get them into 9 pieces of feral, which will take you some time to do if you're newer into the game, but it's actually a crazy boost to your damage. You can, if you've got someone like a Calvalax who puts out 4 poisons at the start of a round, all of your team are going to be doing 20% more damage if he was wearing 9-piece feral. Okay, 20%. Imagine all of those little multipliers starting to add up. Yeah, I've spoken about another 20% with a Bad L. You could have Bad L, Gerptuck, Calvalax. Each time it's like times 1.2, times 1.2, times 1.2. Yeah, your initial 10k hit has just like skyrocketed to I don't know, 18k or something crazy. Like it maybe 17k. Like it's a lot of extra damage if you can start layering these different mechanics together. So feral is one, and then in a similar vein but slightly different, we've got protection set as well. So protection set, allies deal 5% more damage per each buff placed by the wearer on that individual. So someone like a Sifi, for example, she puts 3 buffs on everyone. They're all getting 15% more damage. Okay, so these additional set bonuses, again, can take you from, I'm struggling to hit someone for any sort of damage, to, damn, now I'm absolutely KOing the enemy. And we've got a number of gear sets that's just worth calling out here, because they'll be the ones that you want to look for. Early game, you get crit damage, you just get a little bit of extra crits. Savage ignores enemy defense. Again, defense mitigation is where it's at. You've got some nuanced stuff like retaliation, where you can actually just counterattack. More hits means more damage, but slightly different way of doing it. Cruel set, ignore defense and increase attack. Things like this fatal gear, it's just like basic damage set, it's just stats. Lethal gear, really strong, gives you crit rate and ignore the enemy defense. And then merciless is super strong, so at 6 pieces you ignore 35% of the enemy's defense. You also get this 4-piece bonus where you've got a chance to decrease a random skill cooldown when you deal damage. So, and all of the stats in between are strong, so it just means that basically your champs can be totally cracked. And if you go 9-piece, you've also got a chance of getting another turn. So merciless set's probably the best set in the game for damage dealers, depending on what type of damage dealer you're building. But yeah, Slayer set here as well is quite interesting. So we get the 6-piece ignoring defense when doing AoEs, and we get turn meter fill when doing AoEs on 4-piece. So if you've got someone who's really AoE heavy, then Slayer can be pretty cool as well. But yeah, gear sets makes a big difference. So the last thing I'm gonna throw in the mix here is now Relics. Okay, Relics have come in this year or last year, whenever it was, and they're throwing more and more in the mix. And there are a lot of really, really strong Relics. So a lot of the ones probably are outside of most of our reach because they're, you know, they're mythical, and they're, even if I had like full mythical pieces, it's still a low chance to get. But if you get some of them, they're really strong. So the base level one, which I call out here, is I've got a number of these. I actually use a number of these, yeah, because I don't have a lot of the higher powered ones. But you know, chance to deal more damage when attacking and just straight crit damage. So I'm looking for, is the early stat the stat that I want to do more damage, yes or no? And then is the effect actually going to help me as well? But you know, I mean, there's crazy ones. You've got things like Stormcrawler, if you could ever pick one up. Chance to place Stormcrawler buff on themselves when they land a crit, which gives you all of the like damaging stats, and then a cool active. We've got the Cat's Gaze, if you were lucky enough to pick one up, or 2 up, or 3 up, or 4 up, depending on what you got. I got 1 because I was hard playing my free-to-play at the time. I'm very sad about it. I wish I'd got more of these on my account. Honestly, it's such a crazy item. I've got 1. I have to move it around like all the time. It's so good. It's easily the best thing on my account for damage dealing because we're ignoring defense and we get a high amount of crit damage. But again, there's a whole bunch of really strong effects on these. There's normally 1 crazy kind of like mythical per area, and then the legendaries are normally pretty damn strong as well. So even if it was just for the stats, you know, in Essence Quelcher here, even just the stats are incredibly strong. Then you've got things like the gem slots. So within the gems, you can actually find gems that do things like increase crit damage, or more damage when you're doing multi-skills, or ignore defense on multi-skills, or ignore enemy defense. Like anything like that, which boosts your build. Just totally depends on which ones you've been able to pick up. But yeah, a lot of these different gemstones are going to help you with that ability just to land nukes. So relics and their gems become extremely strong, and you know, the more you can sort of pump those up, the better really for most of your builds. Like that's going to be where it's at. So they're all the main damage dealers. We've got a couple of like nuanced stuff, right? So a really strong way to take down enemies in arena, specifically arena, is with bombs. Bombs blow their way through stone skin. They are super high damage versus like PvE. They ignore defense completely. And for every bomb champion in the game, they scale from attack. Now, not every bomb champion scales the same. All of their bomb damage scales from attack. Okay. What it will show you here is what her hit damage scales from. And again, it's attack. But the only place that I know of where you can find a little bit more information is hellhades.com. So if I was to go and find War Mother and look down in her kind of like multiplier stuff, you can see we've got the multiplier for her damage. This is how hard she will physically hit. But then we've also got the bomb multiplier in here, and it multiplies on attack. Every champion apart from one has a multiplier for bombs on their attack, but a lot of them, it will be a lower multiplier than this. So this is multiplying her attack by 5.5, and that's pretty strong. So if I look at someone like a Galcut, actually he might be a 5 times, I think, off the top of my head. No, 4 times. So he's got like a 4 times multiplier on his bombs. Like all of them are slightly different, and therefore they scale to a different kind of like max potential. Pretty sure Nishak's is 5 times. Yeah, so 5 times, which is high. So yeah, so you can see that your bomb multipliers are literally just looking at your attack. They don't care about crits. They don't care about anything else. And those bombs will ignore all of the enemy's defense. Okay, but you do need them to explode. So bombs are cleansable. It's why champions like Nishak is really strong, because he goes twice and he's able to reduce the cooldown of the bomb timer. Yeah, he puts them out for 2 turns, but he goes again and he reduces the debuff count by 1, which means the bombs will definitely go off. Right? The only bomb champion that scales differently is actually this mythical. As far as I'm aware anyway, the only one who doesn't scale from attack, he scales from HP, which makes his bombs really strong, because he's also got built-in survivability. Yeah, so he puts the bombs on, and they will instantly detonate if he's going against someone with stone skin. So he's like a proper anti-stone skin type of champ. It makes him really, really strong. But it means I don't need to build him with a load of crit rate and stuff. It means building him with high damage is way easier because I'm only focused on 3 stats. I need accuracy to land my bombs. I need HP to scale the bomb's damage. And then I just need him to be at the speed for whatever I need it for that team. And it makes him a threat, honestly, to a lot of enemies because people don't generally build to protect against bomb teams. So that's one to look out for. There's a bunch of other kind of like PvE strong damage things to do. So having someone who does HP burn against all enemies is really strong because anytime a burn goes off on one enemy, it gives a tick of damage to the whole enemy wave. So for late game content, if you don't have hard hitters, HP burn is actually one of the best ways to do damage, especially when you get to late game. And poison, which is the other kind of like dot, which is damage over time, that is generally less effective against bosses late game because they've nerfed or they've buffed bosses against poisons late game. But someone like a Theodore is a really strong champion to like just whack his way through late game waves because he's able to put poisons and multiple poisons on all enemies. And it's also why poisons are strong against clan boss in early to mid game because poison does just like tick of enemy max HP damage. So a bit like War Master or a bit like those enemy max HP hitters, you're guaranteed damage irrelevant how hard you're hitting for, which means you can actually just build to make them really survive a long time and let poisons do all of the damage. And there are ways for both burn and poison to be pretty crazy in arena as well. So now Incinerate is really strong in terms of as long as you've got a decent level blessing, I'd say like stage level 5 and up, you can actually double the damage the burns do against enemies. But the more crazy combo right now is lethal dose with a relatively high level blessing, which means that poisons do more damage against enemies. And then you partner that with the Arachne Elixir, which boosts the damage of those poisons again. And then that can be a really effective way to do damage against enemies. So, as I said at the start of this video, like damage in Raid Shadow Legends is not just a linear build a stat and then you're going to hit harder. There's a lot of different things that you have to consider. But if you've got one thing you're going to take away, it's that you really need to beat the enemy's damage mitigation, which means that you need to beat the enemy's defense. Decreased defense is your friend. Abilities and which are like enemy max HP is your friend. And abilities that ignore defense is your friend if you're trying to do a lot of damage. Hope that was useful, guys. I've been Hell Hades. I'll see you soon.